Imagine receiving a wedding invitation from your ex-husband, not out of kindness, but as his final act of cruelty. He wanted to parade his new billionaire bride in front of the woman he abandoned when she was pregnant and broke. But what happened next left everyone speechless. The ivory envelope felt heavy in Serena Washington's hands as she stood in the cramped hallway of her apartment building, mail scattered across the small table by the door. Her heart skipped when she recognized the elegant script spelling out her name. Inside, gold-embossed letters announced the upcoming marriage of Preston Blackwell to Isabel Montgomery, heiress to one of the largest tech fortunes in the country. But it was the handwritten note tucked behind the invitation that made her blood run cold. I want you to see what real success looks like. Maybe you'll finally understand why I had to leave. Dash P. Serena's hands trembled as she read those words, memories flooding back like a broken dam. 5 years ago, she had been Dr. Serena Washington, a promising NASA engineer with a bright future ahead of her. She had been 7 months pregnant with triplets, glowing with the joy of impending motherhood, when Preston walked out of their marriage and her life forever. His words still echoed in her mind like a cruel mantra. I can't be tied down to someone with no ambition. These babies will just hold us both back. The divorce had been swift and merciless. Preston, a corporate lawyer with connections and ruthless ambition, had made sure she got as little as possible. The stress of the legal battle combined with the complicated pregnancy had cost Serena her job at NASA. By the time her 3 beautiful children, Marcus Jr., Destiny, and Hope, were born, she was alone, broke, and starting over from nothing. Now, 5 years later, Serena worked 3 jobs to keep her family afloat. She cleaned offices before dawn, tutored high school students in mathematics during the day, and worked as a data entry clerk in the evenings. Her apartment was small and the furniture was secondhand, but it was clean and filled with love. Her children, now 5 years old, were her everything, brilliant, curious, and kind despite the hardships they faced. "Mama, what's that?" asked Destiny, her youngest daughter, tugging at Serena's worn jeans as she noticed the fancy invitation. "Nothing important, baby," Serena whispered, quickly tucking the invitation away. But her neighbor and best friend Denise had already seen the expression on her face. "Girl, what's got you looking like you've seen a ghost?" Denise asked, bouncing her own toddler on her hip as she emerged from her apartment across the hall. Serena handed her the invitation without a word. Denise's eyes widened as she read, her expression shifting from confusion to outrage. "That man has some nerve!" Denise exclaimed, then caught herself and lowered her voice, glancing at the children playing nearby. "He's trying to humiliate you, Serena. You cannot go to this wedding." But Serena had already made up her mind. Something deep inside her, a spark of the confidence she once possessed, flickered to life. "Actually, I think I will go." Meanwhile, across town in his luxurious penthouse, Preston Blackwell was basking in his own perceived cleverness. He had spent the morning bragging to his groomsmen about his master plan. "You should have seen her 5 years ago," he said, adjusting his expensive watch as his friends gathered around for their bachelor party celebration. "Pathetic. 3 screaming babies, living off welfare, probably still wearing the same clothes from when we were married." His laugh was cold and calculating. "I've seated her at table 12, right next to the kitchen. I want everyone to see the difference between her and Isabel." Preston's plan was meticulous in its cruelty. He would give a speech during the reception, thanking all the people who knew him when he was nobody. The implication would be clear: Serena represented his past failures, while Isabel represented his glorious future. He imagined Serena sitting there in some cheap dress from a discount store, her children probably misbehaving, while he stood beside his beautiful, wealthy bride, the picture of success. What Preston didn't know was that his bride-to-be, Isabel Montgomery, had serious reservations about the invitation. A genuinely kind woman despite her privileged upbringing, she had questioned Preston about inviting his ex-wife to their wedding. "It seems cruel," she had told him the night before. "Why would you want to hurt someone who's already been through so much?" But Preston had been persuasive, painting Serena as lazy and ungrateful, someone who had never appreciated his ambition and had tried to hold him back. She needs to see that I was right to leave, he had insisted. Maybe then she'll finally understand that some people are meant for greatness and others aren't. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather, sunny and warm, as if the universe itself was setting the stage for something extraordinary. The Montgomery estate was a vision of elegance, with manicured gardens and a view of the Pacific Ocean that took your breath away. Guests began arriving in luxury vehicles, Bentleys, Ferraris, and Mercedes-Benzes forming a parade of wealth and status. Preston stood at the altar, checking his phone obsessively. Part of him worried that Serena wouldn't show up at all, which would ruin his carefully planned humiliation. But as the minutes ticked by and the ceremony was about to begin, he heard a murmur ripple through the crowd. A pristine white limousine had pulled up to the estate's entrance. The chauffeur, dressed in an impeccable uniform, opened the rear door with practiced elegance. Out stepped a woman who took everyone's breath away. Serena Washington emerged like a vision, elegant in a perfectly tailored black dress that highlighted her natural grace, her hair styled in a sophisticated updo, her posture radiating confidence and dignity. But the real shock came when three beautiful children followed her out of the limousine. Marcus Jr., Destiny, and Hope were dressed like little angels, their clothes clearly expensive and perfectly fitted. The boy wore a miniature suit that would have cost more than most people's monthly salary, while the girls were dressed in matching navy blue dresses with pearl accessories. But more than their clothes, it was their demeanor that caught everyone's attention. They moved with quiet confidence, their eyes bright with intelligence, their manners impeccable. Preston's face went white as he watched his ex-wife walk down the aisle to her assigned seat. This wasn't the broken, desperate woman he had expected. This was someone who commanded respect, someone who clearly belonged in this world of wealth and success. The children, his children, though he had never bothered to meet them, were obviously well-educated and beautifully raised. Serena took her seat at table 12 without complaint, her children sitting quietly beside her. She had taught them well about respect and proper behavior, and they demonstrated it now with the poise of children much older than their 5 years. The ceremony proceeded, but Preston could barely focus on his vows. His eyes kept drifting to Serena, trying to reconcile this confident, elegant woman with his memories of the broken person he had left behind. When the officiant reached the traditional "speak now or forever, hold your peace" moment, the church fell into the customary silence. That's when 5-year-old Marcus Jr., in the innocent way that only children can manage, looked up at his mother and asked in a voice that carried clearly through the silent church, "Mommy, is that the man who didn't want us?" The question hit the congregation like a thunderbolt. Every head turned toward Serena and her children, then back to Preston, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Isabel's eyes widened as she turned to stare at her groom, pieces of a puzzle suddenly clicking into place. Serena gently shushed her son, but the damage was done. The whispers had already begun, rippling through the crowd like wildfire. These were Preston's children, the children he had abandoned, and they were clearly remarkable. The reception that followed was an exercise in social dynamics that would have fascinated a sociologist. Preston had expected to corner Serena and find her struggling, perhaps begging for his help or asking for more child support. Instead, he found her surrounded by genuinely interested guests who were drawn to her natural warmth and obvious intelligence. When he finally managed to approach her, his planned words of condescension died in his throat. She looked radiant, completely at ease in this world of wealth and privilege that he had assumed would intimidate her. "Still working those dead-end jobs, I see," he managed to say, trying to recapture some of his planned superiority. Serena looked at him with the same gentle smile she might give to a confused child. "Something like that," she replied simply. Her children, meanwhile, were charming everyone they met. Marcus Jr. was discussing astronomy with a retired professor, while Destiny and Hope were explaining their science fair projects to fascinated adults. These weren't the wild, undisciplined children Preston had imagined. They were clearly gifted, well-educated, and beautifully mannered. Preston excused himself and headed toward the microphone, determined to deliver his planned speech that would put Serena in her place once and for all. He had worked on it for weeks, crafting words designed to humiliate her while elevating himself. He tapped the microphone and began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention." But before he could continue, Dr. Harrison Montgomery, Isabel's father and one of the most respected figures in the tech industry, approached the microphone with an urgent expression. "Excuse me, Preston, but I need to interrupt for just a moment," Dr. Montgomery said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must introduce someone very special who's here with us tonight." The crowd turned their attention to the distinguished older man, curious about this unexpected interruption. "The woman sitting at table 12 is Dr. Serena Washington," Dr. Montgomery announced, his voice filled with genuine respect and admiration. "She's the lead engineer behind the Mars rover project that just made headlines around the world for discovering evidence of water on Mars." A murmur of awe rippled through the crowd. The Mars discovery had been front-page news for weeks, a scientific breakthrough that captured the world's imagination. "But that's not all," Dr. Montgomery continued, his eyes finding Serena in the crowd. "She's also the anonymous donor who has been funding our children's STEM programs for the past 3 years, providing opportunities for underprivileged kids to pursue careers in science and technology." The room erupted in appreciative applause as every head turned to look at Serena with new understanding. She had been quietly changing lives while Preston thought she was struggling in poverty. Dr. Montgomery raised his hand for silence. "I'm proud to announce that Dr. Washington has just accepted the position of Director of Space Exploration at Montgomery Industries, with a starting salary of $2.8 million annually, plus stock options that will make her one of the highest-paid executives in the industry." Preston's champagne glass slipped from his numb fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence that followed Dr. Montgomery's announcement. Isabel stared at her new husband with dawning horror, realizing that she had married a man who had abandoned this extraordinary woman and their children. The crowd was buzzing with excitement and admiration, but all eyes turned to Serena as she gracefully rose from her seat and approached the microphone. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every success through hard work and perseverance. "Thank you, Dr. Montgomery," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'm honored to accept this position and excited about the future of space exploration." She paused, her eyes finding Preston's across the room. When she spoke again, her voice carried no anger, no bitterness, only a quiet strength that was more powerful than any accusation. "Preston, you once told me that I lacked ambition. You were wrong. What I lacked was the right person believing in me." Her words were measured, thoughtful, without a trace of cruelty. "These 3 children that you never wanted to meet? They're all accepted into gifted programs. Marcus Jr. wants to be an astronaut. Destiny is already programming computers. Hope is writing poetry that would make you weep." She smiled then, and it was the smile of someone who had found peace with her past and excitement for her future. "They're going to change the world, Preston. And you know what? If you hadn't left us, I might never have discovered just how strong I really am, so thank you." The reception continued, but it was clear that everything had changed. Guests who had barely noticed Serena before were now surrounding her, eager to discuss her work, her discoveries, her plans for the future. She handled it all with grace, answering questions while keeping one eye on her children, who were basking in the attention and clearly enjoying themselves. Preston, meanwhile, stood alone near the bar, watching his carefully planned evening crumble around him. Isabel had quietly removed her wedding ring and was deep in conversation with her father, her body language making it clear that this marriage was over before it had truly begun. One of Preston's groomsmen approached him, shaking his head in disbelief. "Dude, you left her? The woman who discovered water on Mars? Are you insane?" But Preston couldn't answer. He was too busy watching Serena laugh with their children, seeing the way other guests looked at her with genuine respect and admiration. This was the woman he had dismissed as having no ambition. This was the mother of his children, the children he had never bothered to know, who were clearly brilliant and wonderful. As the evening wound down, Serena gathered her children and prepared to leave. She had accomplished what she came to do, not to seek revenge, but to show her children that grace and dignity would always triumph over cruelty and small-mindedness. "Are you ready to go home?" she asked Marcus Jr., Destiny, and Hope as they climbed back into the limousine. "That was fun, Mama," Destiny said, snuggling up to her mother. "Everyone was so nice to us." "People are usually nice when you're nice to them first," Serena replied, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Remember that." Marcus Jr. looked thoughtful. "Mama, is that man really our father?" Serena considered her answer carefully. "Biologically, yes, but being a father is about much more than biology. It's about love, support, and being there when you're needed." "Then we don't really have a father," Hope said matter-of-factly. "No, baby. You have something much better. You have each other, and you have a mother who would move mountains for you." 6 months later, Dr. Serena Washington stood in her corner office at NASA headquarters, looking out at the launch pads where humanity's dreams took flight. On her desk sat a photograph of her receiving the Presidential Medal of Honor for her contributions to space exploration, flanked by pictures of Marcus Jr., Destiny, and Hope at their respective academic achievement ceremonies. The children were thriving in ways that would have been impossible if Preston had stayed. Marcus Jr. was already working with junior astronaut programs, Destiny had won a national coding competition, and Hope had published a children's book about space exploration. They were confident, accomplished, and kind, everything their mother had raised them to be. Preston's humiliation had been complete and public. His marriage to Isabel had lasted exactly 3 days before she filed for divorce, citing his deception about his character and past. His law firm, embarrassed by the publicity surrounding his treatment of his family, had quietly asked him to resign. He now worked for a much smaller firm, his reputation in tatters, his dreams of wealth and status permanently derailed. But Serena didn't think about Preston anymore. She was too busy planning humanity's first manned mission to Mars, scheduled for 2028, with herself as the mission director. The woman Preston had dismissed as lacking ambition was now leading humanity's greatest adventure. Sometimes people enter our lives to break us, but end up being the catalyst for our greatest success. Serena didn't go to that wedding seeking revenge. She went to show her children that grace under pressure is the ultimate victory. Preston thought he was inviting his poor ex-wife to humiliate her. Instead, he invited the most successful person in the room. True success isn't measured by what you can take from others, but by what you can build despite what others take from you. Character, intelligence, and perseverance will always triumph over cruelty and ego. And sometimes the people who abandon us are simply clearing the path for our destiny to unfold.